Good call.
Let's get to. I wish Charismatic Catholic would call in earlier because we always get him towards the end of the show.
Atlantis. Oh.
Charismatic Catholic, you're on with Laura and Ethan. How are you?
Hey.
I'm doing well, guys. How are you?
Doing good.
Good.
Also, just so you're aware, are you keeping your like identity a secret? Well, just here, fair. Just heads up. If you're worried about your identity, make sure you block your caller ID before you call in. Only if that's something that's important to you. If you don't care, that's fine. But if you do, block it.
Okay, yeah. In concern with calling into you, no, I'm not concerned. So,
well, thank you.
Awesome.
Anyways, you believe in Atlantis?
Well, I believe that when we talk about the city of Atlantis, we have good reasons to think that it is, or I should say, it was a real place and not simply something from like, an underrated, in my opinion, Disney movie or, like a DC Comics, movie. I believe we're talking about a real place that did exist.
Okay, so what makes you think that? What is the evidence for that?
I think it's, and by the way, I'm going to try to speed through this just because if you thought drumming was like background noise, where I live, there's a massive thunderstorm rolling through soon, so I'll try to be quick.
Okay.
So I think when we're examining the story of Atlantis, we have to look at where it comes from, right? So we know that the story of Atlantis comes from Plato. From Plato comes Atlantis through his dialogues. And in these dialogues, he talks about, this prosperous society, that it imposed its power around the world, that had, was a great technological society with seafaring capabilities, and, or I should say this powerhouse essentially of a society, right?
Right.
And he says that he says that he has a phrase in his dialogue where he says that Atlantis ceased to wear its prosperity with moderation, and it's because of this idea that because of this hubris of Atlantis, that's why it was struck down and submerged beneath the waves, and that's the story, right? And the view of the mainstream, historians is that, Plato just made this up, right? He's trying to use an allegory to make some kind of political or philosophical point.
About nations overreaching themselves.
Exactly, right. Yeah, and I think that's pretty much just the given, like, mainstream view on the story. But it's weird because Plato says that it is a true story, right? Like in these dialogues, he says this is a true story. Now, a claim of it obviously isn't going to be enough to, like, make it true,
So I just got to stop you right there because I'm not sure. You said that Plato says it is a true story, and I haven't read Plato's manuscripts. I don't know for sure, but I've actually heard it both ways. I've heard it where he actually does say it as an allegory, and that it's not exactly clear that it's true. So I'm not challenging you per se. I'm more asking for clarification. Like, have you read these manuscripts? Have you studied them?
I've read fragments. I haven't read them in their entirety. They're actually really hard, like in their entirety. They're really hard to come by. Surprisingly, like, there's, if you go to a bookstore and you like go to the Plato section, there's like or the section on Plato, I should say. There's all these texts of his, but the two specific ones that he uses to address Atlantis, they're really hard to come by. So I've if I'm being honest, I've only ever read fragments of them, like via the internet or in other books that reference.
Okay. And to be honest, that would be the same for me in terms of the other books that reference it. I've seen documentaries on it. I've like heard about it. It's come up in my studies in various classes, but it's never been like a focus of a study. It's more been anecdotal or discussed, right? Versus studied. So I really don't know what he said, and I'd heard it both ways. So I'm curious whether he actually said this is an actual real place or whether he was just referencing it and there's an assumption there that he thought it was real.
Right. I think it's actually, even if the thing is that I think it's actually something that I would be most willing to, like, if it's proven wrong, like if someone were to able to actually show, like, no, he clearly expresses this, or he clearly says here, like when he says this is a true story, he's not meaning that in the literal sense, right? I think even if we were to grant that, I think once we dig deeper and we start to look at like the history of it and things like geology and geology and like oceanography, it lends credence to the story that it was actually true, right?
So let's talk about that then. So because you said why you believe Atlantis is real, and we could, even if we both agreed that Plato said it was real, doesn't necessarily mean that it's real. So let's just, because I don't know and I've never read the manuscripts, let's say he says it's real. Why is it that you believe that that's a truth claim?
Because, well, first off, this is one of the things that I have actually been able to identify in a fragment, is where he gives an actual date of when this was supposed to have happened, right? Now, in his manuscript, he says that the cataclysm of Atlantis happened 9,000 years before the time of Solon. Now, we know who Solon was. Solon was a Greek lawmaker who existed 200 years before Plato, around 600 BC. And it's widely accepted that that during Solon's life, he traveled to Egypt. And while visiting the Temple of Sites in the Delta, and examining a temple, he was shown the story of Atlantis by the priest, and he asked the priest,
he being Solon,
when did this happen?
Sorry? Oh, so Plato, he being Plato, asked the priests, when did this happen?
No, Solon.
Solon. Okay, I thought it was Solon. Yeah.
Yeah. Solon asked the priest, well, when is this supposed to have happened? You say that you were, because in the tale that the priest tells Solon, he says that Atlantis was this mighty civilization that we fought wars with. They were our, like essentially our rival. And Solon is skeptical. He says, well, when was this supposed to have happened? And the priest tells him 9,000 years ago. So that's the date of, we're looking.
So you have, I hate to keep interrupting, but like there's just a lot here that I want to make sure we go bit by bit, like piece by piece, right? So you say Plato said that Solon said, the priests said that it happened 9,000 years ago, and the priests have this detailed history of something that happened 9,000 years ago. But this is still coming back to Plato and his words. So I guess my question is, like, yes, we have all this stuff that Plato wrote about. I'd be very impressed if priests 200 years before Plato's time had 9,000 years of history and it was all accurate, right? That would blow my mind. So my question is, what evidence do we have that explanation is trustworthy, or what reasoning do you have to believe that explanation is trustworthy?
Great question. I think if we look at, if we're just gonna like just examine the date itself of, we're looking at 9,600 BC, which in our calendar is 11,600 years ago. Now, thanks to things that we have now, like, fields of study like geology and oceanography, we know that 11,600 years ago, there was a cataclysmic event on this planet. It's actually, it's referred to as meltwater pulse 1b.
I've never heard of that before.
And during this event,
it was meltwater what?
It's called it's referred to as meltwater pulse 1b.
Okay.
Now,
and this is a geological event that geologists talk about?
Yes.
Okay.
It's this idea that it's called meltwater pulse because at the time the planet was undergoing a rapid period of warming, right? And so all of the ice that made up the ice sheets covering you know, the continents were melting off and falling into the ocean and causing the sea levels to rise. This is right at the end of a period that's known as, I'm sorry, I'm getting very technical here. I realize that. And if I get kind of nerdy on this.
No, I love the nerdiness of this, actually. I just wish I could remember my geologic periods a little better, because while I've studied them, I don't have them memorized. And I'm like, where's Brainbug when I need him? Because he kind of has these periods a little bit more down pat. So I'm not going to dispute any period you have to say per se. Like, that's not going to be somewhere where I say, no, actually, it was, you know, 1300 or 1000 years ago or whatever.
Right.
Like, I don't even know.
It's kind of like, to kind of like, because I could go off on like on another tangent about how this was like, you know, at the end of a period that's known as the Younger Dryas, which was like a period of intense warming on the planet. There's a hypothesis out there now that it was actually caused by a fragmented comet.
Yeah. Okay, so if we're talking about that time period, I'm tracking you. Yeah, you've got me nailed in now, because I do know about that period.
Just a heads up, we do have to wrap up in a moment, but I'll let you two continue.
Okay, so just to put a little bow on it, I think that if we look at the claim that Plato makes, where the time where this is supposed to have happened, right, 9,600 BC, 11,600 by our calendar, we know based on our own geology, based on our own oceanography, that this planet was undergoing a massive warming that caused the ocean levels to rise at precisely that date. So if Plato was making this up, if this was just an allegory or a tale to make a political point, he was remarkably on the nose in terms of dating for when an event that could cause something like the destruction of Atlantis would occur on this planet. And when I say remarkably on the nose, I mean pretty much to the date. So I think when we look at that, it gives us this, it should give us this this path to believing that perhaps this isn't some made up story that we see, you know, on a Disney movie, or, you know, like, you know, with Jason Momoa swimming through the, you know, the kingdom. Perhaps this was actually a real place, and these people did exist. And
I mean,
that is the.
Oh, sorry.
No, I was done.
No, it'd be cool if it did. That's for sure. Especially if it was like the Atlanteans from the comics. That would be.
I mean, cool. That would be cool.
Yes.
Yeah, I have an easier time believing in the concept of an Atlantis that was advanced for the time than believing necessarily the Atlantis that's depicted in comics. Right. Yeah, right, I think it would be really super compelling. But I'll go ahead.
I was just gonna say, to be like, I wouldn't even be sure, like, in terms of like, if we're talking about like, you know, crystals and, you know, woo power, like I would be just agnostic on specifics like that, right? I'm just absolutely concerned with the claim of, did the actual place, were these real people? Did they live real lives?
Yeah, so let's take just a moment to explore that, because that is what's intriguing to me. Because yeah, like you, I don't necessarily, it would take a lot more for me to believe the really hyped up sci-fi version of it. And I doubt that's what the original people had in mind as they have passed this story down over the years, from Plato's time to ours. I really doubt that it started with what we conceptualize it as today. So let's just go with the whole idea of a city of advanced people, and whether or not a city like Atlantis or called Atlantis actually existed. The only problem that I have right off the top of my head, and this is just trying to apply skepticism to it and see, like, are there any holes in this argument or not, is so you have thousands and thousands and thousands of historical manuscripts that talk a lot about these really vague periods, like in the time of so-and-so and 300 years before so-and-so, and it was this many eras or this many life cycles, or here's the lineage back from, you know, from Jesus to Abraham or whatever. You have a lot of that. And then you have a percentage of it that's going to sort of line up with geological history. So my question is, if we took all the manuscripts and tried to date each individual event, A, how many of them do you think would line up just kind of by chance with geological events? And B, would that be enough to convince you that no matter what the manuscript said, that manuscript is true?
I would say for the first question, I guess I couldn't. It would be hard for me to give you an honest answer on that. For the first one, I really don't know. And in terms of the second question, I would say that it wouldn't be enough to give me like absolute certainty in the belief. Like if I was just looking at nothing but geological evidence, it wouldn't be enough to give me like absolute certainty. But I think it would convince me that perhaps the story, like a story that I had been told, you know, that had essentially been programmed into me from the time I was a kid, that perhaps that isn't the right story, that there is an alternative that might be valid. But I wouldn't have absolute certainty of it.
I think that's good. I think that it's a starting point for like, ooh, maybe that piques my interest a little bit. And so your timeline does pique my interest a little bit. But in terms of, oh my gosh, it convinces me that Atlantis actually exists, I would say there would have to be a lot more wrapped up into it than just a manuscript, like a sort of a date reference lining up with a geological period.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Well, Charismatic Catholic, next week would totally invite you to call in earlier, but I do really appreciate you actually doing like calling about Atlantis, because that's I don't like just sticking to religion. I think it's fun to cover a wide variety of topics and make the show way more interesting than just having the same calls all the time.
Yeah, I agree. Atlantis is interesting.
Thanks for letting me call in, and thanks for always being, you know, kind and respectful.
Of course. And I was just in Austin, Texas this weekend. Matt, where are you from, Charismatic Catholic?
Yeah, I'm in Austin.
Okay. I was about to say that, but I was like, shit, I don't know if he wants people to know where he's from. If I would have known how to get a hold of you, I totally would have invited you to come out with us, because we had a good time. But thanks so much for calling in.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, thanks for having me again on the show,
dude. And if you can,
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate you calling in, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye. Have a good night.